Hello and welcome back to the Building HVAC Science podcast. Our aim is to create better, more knowledgeable HVAC and building performance technicians by helping these two professions better understand each other. And this podcast aims to make customers happy in the homes and buildings they live and work in through the work of the listeners of this podcast, those technicians, those contractors that do this work. In this episode, we actually welcome back Brent Davidson. He's founder of the U.S. Heat Pump Summit. He provides a very energizing discussion that soars from glider flights. This is an interesting part. You really want to hear this. To the front lines of heat pump education and adoption. He shares his backstory behind launching the summit from a hunch inspired by observations in his solar industry background to the growing movement that now brings together top contractors, technical experts, manufacturers, and rebate program leaders. His goal? To improve both the business and field deployment of air and water-based heat pump solutions. It's very interesting. He's combining the business and the technical in a very succinct format against this one topic, heat pumps. Brent gives us an idea of what sets the summit apart, which is a laser focus on a real-world, immediately actionable knowledge. Things, as he says, you can take away and use tomorrow or next week. It's got a casual yet collaborative vibe, with a mission to unify high-performance trades around the electrification of homes. Now, this is all about an event happening November 18th to 19th at the DCU Center in Worcester, Massachusetts. And there'll be tracks, a full trade show floor, and a speaker lined up packed with industry leaders. And we get into a little nerdy deep dive at the end, talking about the glider flights, which inspired the conversation before we began recording. There's some links in the show notes to the first podcast Brent came on, as well as links to the U.S. Heat Pump Summit and his background, as well as his email if you want to get in touch, especially if you want to get in touch as a presenter or an exhibitor. And of course, the website is where you can register as an attendee. Okay, let's get into this conversation with Brent Davidson on airflow, action, and ideas. Brent Davidson's mission to elevate heat pump pros.
All right, folks, welcome back to the Building HVAC Science podcast. We've been prepping here a little bit, having a good conversation, and Bill said, well, this is too good. We got to record it. So welcome back. Bill Spohn over there, the great Bill Spohn, Eric Kaiser here, and special guest today, Mr. Brent Davidson from the U.S. Heat Pump Summit, who we've just been learning a little bit about is a sailplane or glider pilot. Welcome to the show, Brent. That sounds a bit over our heads, I'm thinking.
Oh, come on.
Well, obviously, thanks for having me back, guys. This is my first repeat podcast in my journey with the U.S. Heat Pump Summit. So big shout out to Bill for having me on the first time in, I think, August of 2023. So if anyone wants to see how I've gotten better at my talking points. But yeah, as Eric was saying, we were just talking all things atmosphere and airflow and whatnot. So I fly gliders, which are airplanes with no engines. So you get a tow off the ground, but that's only for a couple minutes. You're on a 200-foot rope behind essentially a crop duster, big tractor, good at pulling stuff. And then you get a few 2,000 feet above the ground or so, pull a release handle. And then if you've positioned it right, you're into a bubble or a column of rising air called a thermal. And everyone's seen these, like a big group of birds circling overhead, that they're taking advantage of that same thing. And at the risk of being nerdy on this podcast, we can go into some of the details of how that airflow in the atmosphere works and what allows that thermal to keep going. And it has to do with basically pressures and temperatures of volumes of air. So it actually has a lot of overlap, Bill. And Eric kind of reminded me about the overlap between these two activities of soaring and HVAC. So that's pretty fun.
I mean, HVAC and building performance in general, we are dealing with pressure differentials. We're dealing with air density. We're moving air around. We're trying to control that. So it was amazing to me the tie-in between the two, that not directly, but very, very indirectly and a little bit directly.
And you mentioned you set a personal best recently?
Yeah, so I just flew on Saturday. So I'm out in the San Francisco Bay Area. So we go up to the Lake Tahoe region over summer to fly, because the Sierra Nevada mountains, and then in particular out into Nevada over the desert, becomes really good conditions over summer. And so, yeah, forecast was good. Got out there on Saturday, took off out of the Truckee Tahoe airport. Same thing, I was on tow for maybe 8 minutes, and then ended up flying for 5 hours. But time's one thing, but the measurement of distance is other. So I basically flew 300 miles. And the way it's scored is you take the 3 farthest points apart on the flight, and then that's called your triangle distance. So you take 3 points that are the farthest apart in your like squiggly flight track, And then the length of the perimeter of that triangle is your distance, basically. So about 300 miles in that. In terms of the ground track, it's like 450 miles. So you're doing a lot of squiggly stuff, and you might be in a thermal for 10, 12 minutes, climbing up and whatnot. But yeah, good conditions.
Spiral up in a thermal, come out of that, coast down to another one, spiral back up.
This kind of day was so strong, you'll basically have these really large alignments of big cumulus clouds. So picture like a puffy postcard cloud day. And when those line up, you can just run that line of energy the whole way. So you'll have conditions that have to do with the sun hitting the ground and terrain, whatever, create this cloud street. And we'd spend 10, 15 minutes at about 150 miles an hour, which would be the top speed of the glider, just in this rising air, trading the lift, the rising air, for horizontal speed. So you're nosing over almost you're falling into a vertical column of rising air. And partly because that air gets pretty thin up at 17,000 feet, you can cheat a little bit and go extra fast. So 150 across the ground would be faster than you could do, say, at 10,000 feet. Just a little bit of a trick that you can play with that air. But it's pretty cool. I mean, you're cruising along that kind of speed with something that has essentially almost no moving parts. It's a couple linkages for your ailerons and flaps and stuff or whatever. Nothing rotating. You're just sitting there.
Except maybe your stomach.
Yes. Except maybe your stomach. Well, if you want to get into gas expansion, we can talk about that too.
Let's get into the Heat Pump Summit and see how you've navigated the thermals of running it for the fourth time now?
This will be the third.
Third time. Okay. Well, it seems like the fourth, but how have you elevated and moved through the transitions and run the line of energy with the Heat Pump Summit?
Wow. If only Eric would just take that layup with a cheesy joke, but I'm going to keep talking so he can't, but I know he's thinking of one right now.
Yes.
A little bit of background for folks who are new to this US Heat Pump Summit event that I've been pulling together is it's first and foremost an event that's for contractors. So that's why we're here. That's why Bill and Eric have both presented at the event. It covers air and water, so content for the HVAC crowd, content for the plumbing crowd. And it's really all about how do you have success both technically and in business with heat pump technology. So that's my 10-second commercial there. The answer to your question, Bill, is the first one was a bit of a hunch coming from the solar world. So my background's really coming from the solar technology world, doing a lot of software for everything from financing programs for big complex utility scale solar down to in-home iPad apps that might be sort of a solar version of Conduit. I see you have the shirt on there.
I do.
Nice rep today.
Yes.
And out of that, I was just spending a lot of time with HVAC and solar contractors and saw there's a lot of great software being built. But I also saw there was such a big spread of quality of installations and such a big spread of business approaches by contractors. And it just seemed like once I looked around, there was not a heat pump specific event in HVAC, in particular on the HVAC side, that it seemed like there was an opportunity to drive a conversation around how to improve those things, the installs and the business side. So it was kind of a flyer. If I'm being honest, to try the first one, I time boxed it, took about 4 months, got connected through my solar connections to Bill. Bill immediately opened a lot of doors for me, immediately became a supporter of the event and said, okay, we also think there's something here. Let's go down that path. So first one was a real success. Second one repeated in Denver. I had to fit it in before I got married. So I rushed to do another one, which was a bit taxing on my end, but it came off well, good feedback. And out of those first two, the learning was really, there's definitely a lot of appetite for the technical stuff, but there's really a gap in the market overall, the media side of these businesses that we're in around that business training. So we're really trying to lean into this event being really both those tracks. The technical stuff, you can really make sure that you're deploying great building science in the field, but then the business side of how to wrap an organization around deploying that building science in the field. You can have a technician that's taken every course, but if they're not incentivized to say that extra, might be only 10 minutes, half an hour or something, if they're not incentivized to do that, to run X, Y, or Z building science-based analysis, tests, commissioning step, et cetera, it doesn't matter that you take the course. So if your business is not set up to deliver it, it's not going to land. So that's kind of where we're at with the third one. And also just trying to punch above our weight a little bit. We're at a full trade show venue this year. First two are like student union buildings, which were fun, but challenging to host events. And this one's really full trade show floor, building up a custom layout. So you're going to walk out of the content rooms. You'll walk basically straight to the trade show floor. It's going to be a really great space. So that's our trajectory.
Give us dates and venue.
Absolutely. Yeah, good question. So it's November 18th and 19th in Worcester, Mass. And for the non-New England people like myself, that's spelled Worcester. So if you're trying to Google it, but you can also go to the usheatpumpsummit.com website, and that has some of the information there. Obviously, we have a website as well.
Very nice. You said this is really contractor focused. There's a lot of business. So you're bringing in a lot of business people. There's going to be some technical presentations there. True Tech will be there. I don't know if we've identified people that are going to be attending this year. Pretty sure I'm going to be there. Might have somebody else there as well.
I will be.
Oh, you're going as well?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, there's two of us that are going to be there. So we know that now. There's other groups of people, because I've been at both of the, actually, Bill and I have been at both of them so far. There's other groups of people that come in here as well. There's researchers. Are you seeing a lot of good information, and how are people reacting to the researchers and things like that coming in and speaking at these events?
So I always lead with it's a contractor focused event just to clear the air on who's the primary audience here. The bar for content we try to hold is that whatever someone's going to present on generally has to be useful in the field or the office that next day or that next week. We're trying to make sure it's really tactical information. That being said, we're also trying to pull in this comprehensive view of the industry. So I think you're referring to some like the National Lab folks who have attended, Eric. Is that the angle when you say researchers?
I've seen a number of the National Lab people here. I've seen some people from manufacturers maybe doing research or looking at what the future is, what they can bring in for the future that's going to be necessary.
Yeah, exactly. So at a high level, I'd say the primary audience is by far contractors, but we're having attendance from a number of the national labs. We also are working really closely with a lot of the rebate groups. So the goal for this one is that it is a national presence event, but just given the density of contractors doing heat pumps in the Northeast, that's why we brought it to the Northeast. It's always been on the radar. There'll obviously be a heavy focus of the rebate content. There'll be a heavy focus in the Northeast. So that's bringing in your rebate implementers, your utilities, a couple different types of consulting groups. And we're really trying to figure out how to create two-way conversations with those groups, because we're sort of this neutral turf. If a utility hosts an event, they don't necessarily want everybody to show up and tell them how bad their rebate program is. They'll never say it out loud, but everyone kind of understands that that's a fair position to host. So we're happy to host those conversations. And then the researcher side, some of the presentations we had, are still trying to be a bit more tactical. There are some edges to that. There's some fun nerd corners to go down, but we're trying to make sure the event is actionable for an owner, manager audience in particular, to come away with stuff they can use right away. And yeah, if there's some interesting presentations from researchers, they'll take that. But what we're not having is some 10, 15-year out technology that's a presentation to people who are filing patents and setting technical standards that's 15 years out. So that's just clarifying on who the audience attendees are.
You have 6 tracks identified in your promotional activities: high performance HVAC, heat pump water heater, hot water success, selling heat pumps. That's on the field side of things. Why did you choose those?
They fit nicely on the website.
Okay. You read it somewhere.
Yeah, well, no, I mean, there's a lot behind it, but I joke because anyone who's pulled together an organization from the beginning, you have to juggle a lot of things quickly and wear a lot of hats. So we set out those content guidelines all the way back in maybe even December to sort of give a spread of here's the main tracks. So the goal, if you go to the website again, usheatpumpsummit.com, under learning tracks, Bill's referring to, there's a section for field staff and a section for owners and managers. So the biggest piece here is trying to just plant that flag in the ground and saying, we're getting into technical stuff and we're getting into business stuff. And we're trying to do this in a way where I think both of the events so far, we've done like a 4-stage progression from the fundamentals all the way through commissioning on the technical side. On the business side, we're trying to make sure that there's very complementary topics so that it becomes a bit more of this well-rounded course experience rather than going to, say, a very large event and it's just kind of a hodgepodge of talks. More specific to the content, we want to make sure that there's something for field staff in HVAC. So some of these building science things you guys obviously spend a lot of time on this podcast talking about. We want to make sure there's something for the heat pump water heater crowd, which increasingly it would say the plumbing crowd, but a lot of people from even solar folks are starting to do heat pump water heaters, at least in California. And then selling is a bit of a business topic, but it's an in the field activity. So those just felt like a good comprehensive approach to cover some of the key parts.
You've locked down some fairly large name sponsors. You want to talk about them and the dialogue you had to bring them in? Like, what did they see?
When you look at the technology being used in the home, heat pumps represent one thing that attract the service providers, the contractors who are forward thinking. And so I think pretty quickly, the fact that there was not an event that was really focused all around heat pump technology, and now that there is, has become this bit of a signal to say, hey, if I'm really paying attention, I'm really doing the best to grow and improve my business in this world that we're in, that will lead you to heat pumps. And so it's been a pretty clear conversation because all these other companies, all these big manufacturers, they sell around the world. And I think they've all been just waiting to see whether it's American manufacturer or an international one. I think they've all just been seeing at some point the US market's going to turn towards heat pumps. And for a variety of reasons, we're at that inflection point. And so it has not been hard to drum up conversations to say, hey, we're getting together contractors who see that this is the next step in that high performance home. This is how you're delivering comfort. This is how you're pairing with, in a lot of markets, the US, home solar has a lot of penetration. Batteries are coming. The home is going electric. And there's some very real physics reasons for that. And so like a lot of these trends are just unstoppable. It just depends on how fast they're going to go and how much quality we could drive behind it. So if we can present a place that manufacturers can connect with contractors who understand this trend and want to be part of it, doing great work and good business, then it's kind of a natural fit.
And just want to make sure people picked up, it's usheatpumpsummit.com, because heatpumpsummit.com will take you someplace very different.
That is a good call out.
I'm looking at their website right now, and it seems like a mono track and more policy oriented. Have you studied that at all?
Yeah, so this is funny. So they sat on that URL for probably 6 months when I was starting the first one, and I did my internet sleuthing and found the punchline is it's a UK event. As Bill clarified, our event is the US Heat Pump Summit. And I emailed them a bunch because I thought they were just sitting on the URL and they never replied. And then I loaded it one day and there's a whole website there for their UK event. But Google's pretty smart. If you're searching for it, Google knows where you are and haven't had any issues with people coming to their own site through search. But yeah, if you just pump in heatpumpsummit.com.
Nothing against people from the UK, but I see a lot of ties, a lot of formality. Your event is not like that.
No, you can, within reason, you can wear what you want. But if you want to show off your HVAC tattoo that's on your shoulder, that's fine by me, but keep it within reason. One that speaks to, I see, yeah, you're on their gallery page here. There's a contractor audience. We've picked an area that has a lot of folks doing heat pumps. And so if you're driving in and the next day you're going out to a job, then just dress how you go to the job. There's no need to dress up for this thing. Even though I put on a collared shirt, just because I thought Bill sets a high bar. I wasn't sure what to wear.
That's because you sweated out all your T-shirts sailplaning.
Well, you get that good soaring days are cold up top, get that lapse rate going. So
there you go.
We'll come back to that at the end. We can do a little nerding on the atmosphere at the end.
Sure.
It's all about those psychrometrics in the atmosphere.
Exactly. That is true.
What excites you most about where you've gotten to with this, the fact that you can move to a full trade show venue? Do you feel like you've tapped in? Is there more to tap into, or you've tapped into the right aspects of the industry?
Starting at the very specific heat pump portion, the hunch has played out to be true that there was not a heat pump specific event for whoever's doing heat pumps, air and water and domestic hot water and radiant heat, all those things. And I think the reception to this has been very clear because it's named very clearly. The US Heat Pump Summit it gets people's attention right away because you immediately know what it is. So we don't suffer from a branding challenge. So I think that's the very first part of your question of like, there was a hunch. The first two proved that to be true. And now it's converting that into, let's grow up a little bit, put on the collared shirt, be at a trade show venue, drive a larger attendance, drive 2 full days of content. First one is 1 day, second one is a day and a half. So we're just chipping away. I think 2 days is the sweet spot. Bigger picture, I think there's a lot of these similar trends that we're seeing in the heat pump world that apply to a lot of trades. So kind of how I see this is your prototypical contracting leader, say 10 to 40, 50 person company, maybe a little bit larger. They've come up through the ranks. They know the trade. They've used all the tools. They can tell everyone, especially in the field side of the business, hey, here's how I did it, or here's whatever, what we could do better. But they have not necessarily encountered some really high quality, sophisticated business training. And so whether or not we need some formal university-based pipeline into that kind of thing is debatable. But I think it's fairly clear when you look around that, especially if you look at how people finance their businesses and the sophistication level that's being brought there, that we could professionalize the industry a little bit more. And so if you look at whether it's HVAC or solar or plumbing or electrical, or those core electrification trades, there's similar work to be done across those from the business side. Heat pumps represent a nice change to sort of enter that market. But as I look at how do we grow a larger conversation, it's around bringing those trades together because we're looking at an electric home. So HVAC, solar, plumbing, electrical. And then saying, how do we all as a group of 4 trades work together best to create the electric home? And a big part of that is just getting a little bit savvier on the business side to understand that contracting businesses are defined by your cost of customer acquisition. There are a lot of people trying to sell stuff to homeowners. There are a lot of people who can deliver that work. A simple example, if you, as a heat pump contractor, can have a touch point and a partnership with a solar contractor, that becomes really fruitful for the both of you. You never have to go multi-trade. You just drop off a pamphlet or learn a couple of the talking points or learn a little bit more about the energy assessment of the home. If they have solar and you're selling a heat pump, if that's in, say, California, where the pricing becomes really aggressive once you go solar to consume off those panels, if you're selling a heat pump and that's going to go way off the grid at your peak summer cooling times, that person's not going to be happy with you. So why don't you have a relationship with a solar installer who can come have a conversation of, hey, your energy needs have changed. Let's revisit adding some panels. We did the install and we know that HVAC contractor. So that's kind of how I see the next stage of growth, is trying to figure out how to, in some way, rally this around being, whether it's the US Electric Home Summit or multiple events co-located and you can have some cross-pollination. But I can go into more examples there around how these trades, because of this change to electric technology, are becoming more linked than they would have been in the past.
Very interesting. For our listeners, some of them may recognize some of the speakers you've lined up already. You want to go through the list?
Yes, if you go on the site, we've got about 12 folks up right now. Our final speaker list will be around, I think 40s are our numbers. So we've got another 12 on deck. I got to get up on the site. But for the New England crowd, Alex Meany, big name, and lives actually just down the street, as well as Chris Morin. Ty Brannaman, really engaging presenter, was a big draw at the HVAC Symposium down in Florida. HVAC Chicks Jennifer, obviously a lot of great presence online. Really excited to have her. Also Northeastern in person. Maybe not known as broadly, but Hal Smith from Halco Home Solutions. He's basically really excited to help share the secrets of the success that he's had to run his businesses, doing a lot of heat pumps over many decades. I know friend of the pod here, Chad Simpson, has given it a yes. So here, if I say it on the pod, then he's definitely in.
You figured it out.
Good to hear Chad in there. Yeah.
We're trying to put together, and I'd be, of course, there's always a spot open for Eric Kaiser to come present, award-winning trainer. So we hope to welcome him and his mustache back to the event for a third time.
Will that require 2 different admission tickets?
No, it's not like an airline seat. I should also mention Chris Hughes at the Energy Conservatory. Obviously, I know, a very close friend of the pod as well.
And also Eric from Amply Energy and Zach Payne from Slipstream up in Wisconsin.
Exactly. So the way we're doing the content, so I should give a shout out to Dan Willenhouse, Peter Trost, and Chris Morin, who's our speaker selection committee. So we're putting all 4, I guess, of our heads together and saying who's really going to represent both those technical tracks and the business tracks really well. So again, expect that list to grow. We're getting a lot of the names in the hat first and then pulling who's speaking on what from there, just because this is such a capable group of presenters. So obviously we're still just under 6 months out, expecting an actual agenda to come, but you can get a sense of it from those initial speakers.
And if someone wants to suggest a presentation, there's a link on the site, or what's the best way to do that?
Yeah, you can click the submit a talk. Feel free to also just email me. I'm just Brent at usheatpumpsummit.com. So that's BRENT at usheatpumpsummit.com. Maybe I should set up Brett just to catch any misspellings, but
yeah, to redirect.
Yeah.
Until you get a guy named Brett on the staff, and then it's
not allowed. Not allowed. Red line, Eric. Red line.
What is the DCU Center, the venue itself?
Yeah, so DCU Centers, it's just a large event center. So they have everything from monster trucks to concerts to, I don't know the largest sport that they can fit in there, but basketball, et cetera, stadium vibe. And then right attached to that is this trade show area. So we'll be taking over one floor. It's ground level, easy walk straight into. They host like cement truck shows there. So you can bring your heaviest piece of HVAC equipment. It'll handle it just fine. And then, like I said, we're doing the custom layout. So it's going to be trade show, air wall, helping with noise. But the moment you walk out from a talk, you'll be back on the show floor. It's not going to be like navigating some big maze that sometimes you end up at.
And also pitch for exhibitors too.
Exactly. We're going to have good foot traffic for sure.
I've really enjoyed the conversations that we've had at these events. It's a little smaller than some of the large national events that we go to, which I think really helps to have some really good, deep conversations. And everybody there has been really accessible and really willing to talk as far as the other exhibitors that I've talked with. And for attendees, that makes a lot of difference when you can just walk up and talk to somebody and ask them questions, things like that. It's very useful for that.
Precisely. I'd say there's a couple of things that we're really trying to keep an eye on. The big one you comment on is just the I don't know if it's a word, but try for my vocab for the day, the homogeneity.
Hmm.
That's probably not a word. Just you want to go to an event where everyone has similar interests as you. We're really trying to focus in on making sure that, like I said, these are contractors doing work with heat pumps. So you go to other events, and I've seen you guys all events. A lot of them we're all really happy to go to. So I don't want to talk down on any of them. It's just a different angle. We're trying to say everyone you bump into, you're going to have something to talk about. Literally, like if you're getting coffee and you bump into someone, so you're shoulder to shoulder at the coffee, you're both installing heat pumps one way or another, whether it's someone in the field and an owner together. Whereas certainly at the industry's largest conference, the default is that you definitely don't have anything in common with someone you bump into. So we're trying to create that feeling of community. And then in terms of size, we're obviously trying to grow this thing. So the attending target's 800 to 1,000. So it'll definitely have a bigger feel. But again, it's still coming back to that same set of everyone that comes up to your table as an exhibitor. And we've got a lot of good feedback from exhibitors of every conversation I had was good. No one just came by to get my free pens.
Yeah.
Everyone knew what they were talking about. The level of intent very high with heat pumps, whether they're just getting into it or already have a business that's scaled up but wanting to grow it. So it's a good call out, Eric. And it's been fun having you guys there too. It's a good vibe, and all the folks on this podcast, I think, would enjoy it as well.
I'm curious, Brent, what are some of your personal experiences with heat pumps?
I would like one in my house. I have an apartment I rent. For the video listeners, I'm in the lower level. It's a house that's been converted into several apartment units. And we have such stratification of temperatures because the return air is at head level in the basement and the heat comes from the ceiling. So thankfully, we're in coastal California, so our heating and cooling, well, there's really no cooling need. Heating needs very limited. So the honest answer, Eric, is I wish I had more personal experience because I would love to get a more comfortable HVAC system in here.
That's a great call out because my take on heat pumps is comfort. I love them for comfort, and I love the ability to make people more comfortable with something that's right sized for them. But that's a whole thing. We'll get into it at the summit itself.
It gets worse. I'm standing next to a radiator, and then in the room over, we have a dehumidifier. So it's a comfortable place in the world to live. You just got to watch your basement moisture a little bit. Where this is like a walkout basement, basically, that I'm in right now.
So as we wrap up here, I'd like to ask you to summarize some closing thought for the listeners. And I have one question for you from our pre-show conversation a nerdy topic I want you to explore, which I think is very interesting. But you go ahead and do your wrap up there.
Yeah, so the U.S. Heat Pump Summit is November 18th and 19th in Worcester, Massachusetts. I'm sorry, the North New England cloud. I'm still working on it. At the DCU Center, entirely contractor-focused event, business and technical tracks. And it's just really for any contractors who are doing work with heat pumps, whether they're touching air, touching water, whatever it ends up being. And we have some of the top technical trainers and some of the top contractors who are succeeding with this. And the whole goal is just to help folks do better work and end up with better businesses involved with heat pumps.
Very good. The nerdy question I had for you as we close out here is talking about the coffin corner. That's not a place to get coffee, by the way.
Or get sick.
So this is for the aviation nerds. And so as mentioned, I like to fly sailplanes. And this is not something that, I should disclaim this. This is not something that affects your airliner. This is not something that affects your personal hobby plane. This is something that affects very high altitude aircraft. So significantly higher than your airplane goes. But that disclaimer out of the way, for the air nerds in the crowd, as you go up in the atmosphere, it gets thinner. I think everyone generally knows that. A fun fact is that half of the mass of the atmosphere is below 18,000 feet. So what's that? Call it 3 miles, a little bit over. Think horizontally 3 miles. That's not far. You can walk that. That's half of what protects us from space. So when you think about some of these things around the composition of the atmosphere and all the stuff we put into it, whatever, there's not a lot up there. It's crazy thin. Now, the other half of the mass goes out to it's like hundreds of thousands of feet just because the fall off is so exponential. As you go up to, say, 60, 70, 80,000 feet that like a U-2 flies at, so U-2 spy plane, if you don't know that, just Google it. It's a pretty funny looking plane. You end up having to go very fast to create a pressure differential over the wing. So how does an airplane fly? It creates low pressure on the top of the wing, high pressure on the bottom. As you go through much thinner air, you have to go much faster to create that pressure differential. And the problem then becomes you're hitting the air molecules going very, very fast. And even though they're very light and there's not a lot of them, you can end up basically causing a harmonic vibration in the plane. And so your trade-off is I have to go super fast so I can generate enough lift so I don't stall. which is when the wing stops flying and the plane starts to use the word fall out of the sky loosely, but it starts to fall out of the sky at that point.
Like a leaf. Yeah.
Not be as much of a plane anymore and more of a brick.
Yeah, a little bit. So you got to go fast enough to avoid stalling. But when you're at those altitudes, you are coming right up against the speed limit of the airplane, where you're hitting those molecules so fast you can induce those harmonic vibrations, which are known as flutter. And the wings will actually just start shaking and then hit a resonance frequency and can just break off. So that is called the coffin corner, because you're making this trade-off between, do I speed up so I don't stall, or do I need to slow down so I don't break apart?
Wow.
Again, not a feature of your next Delta airline flight, just to any...
You said 60, 70, 80,000 feet, but you've demonstrated your understanding. What impressed me about you is you're a vacuum for ideas, and you're a very fast processor. I want people to know who is in charge of this conference, the kind of person you are, and that was the point of that question.
Well, I appreciate it, Bill.
All that stuff sounds like it was way over my head, and I'm a tall guy.
Oh, okay, there you go. Where's the ban button?
We'll have to have a separate episode on aviation and psychrometrics.
Yes, there you go. See, I told you were a fast study.
Not psychometrics, psychrometrics.
Yeah, I like it.
Hey, Brent, thank you for coming on. We look forward to seeing you later this fall. We're recording this in June, and we'll release, I think, sometime before the end of June. So people take a look at that, usepumpsummit.com, exhibitors, speakers, and especially attendees. Look forward to seeing you there.
And if I could add one more, anyone who has any audience with contractors, other podcasts, we're actively reaching out to a lot of the rebate implementers who have big audiences, anyone who can help get the word out about this. And we're going to come up with some ticket referral thing as well. So if you feel like telling all your friends, get in touch.
Sounds cool. Thanks, Brent.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Bill and Eric.
Thanks, Brent.
Thanks again for tuning into this podcast. If you have any questions or want to suggest a topic or just reach out, contact us at marketing@truetechtools.com. That's TRUTECHTOOLS.com. Some of the topics we discuss require technical training for proper interpretation or safe execution. So if you're a trained pro, you can go right ahead. If you're not, please consult with and hire a pro. The Building HVAC Science podcast is a production of True Tech Tools Limited. In full disclosure, I'm the owner of True Tech. The options expressed are those of my guests, my co-host, or myself, depending on who's speaking, of course. If you're in the market for any tools or test instruments mentioned in our podcast, or just in general, take a look at our offering at truetechtools.com, our website, TRUTECHTOOLS.com. And you can use the super secret discount code of HVACBS to achieve a nice discount. I want to thank you for listening to and hopefully subscribing and following Building HVAC Science, this podcast. We look forward to having you back next time to listen to Building HVAC Science. Until then, take care.